Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Dr. Helen Redmond. Helen is the New South Wales representative for the Doctors for the Environment Australia, a voluntary organisation of medical doctors in all states and territories. They work to address the diseases, local, national and global, caused by damage to the Earth's environment. Dr. Redmond is a rehabilitation physician and lecturer at the School of Public Health and Community Medicine at the University of New South Wales. She's a passionate defender of the environment and has a deep concern with the community health impacts of CSG mining. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Helen Redmond.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for inviting me here to speak. It's a real pleasure to be here again. I was here in February 2013. It's very formal. Saying similar things, I think you'll find. I suppose I want to focus today to be just a little bit on drinking water and particularly on our water catchment. And I guess we have a habit of taking a lot of things for granted. We're a very lucky society. Turning the tap on and having a beautiful, clean glass of water is something that I value very highly. And I think if you think about it, everybody does. And also we have a beautiful catchment system and there's a lot of beautiful natural areas down there. I was lucky enough to have a kayak on one of the bodies of water down south in the Ingleburn Valley that is part of our catchment, and it was absolutely stunning and very undisturbed. So long may that continue. So Jess has covered all the sort of technicalities extremely well, and I won't labour it, but there are basically the same environmental and health risks no matter what type of unconventional gas that you're talking about. And no matter, some of the industry sort of likes to make comparisons and says one's safer than the other, but basically the same risks apply. And as you've also heard, we're becoming a big exporter of LNG and have a lot of shale deposits that are being developed in WA and the Northern Territory as well. So medical groups have been very vocal against unconventional gas, explaining the risks, expressing concern, not just Doctors for the Environment, but many others, including the Australian Medical Association and global international organisations as well. And the reason for that is that unconventional gas threatens every single environmental determinant of health. And those things are clean water, clean air, a safe food supply, and a stable climate. And a lack of contact with nature, because there's increasing evidence that mental health is affected by a lack of contact with nature. So in terms of water, it's got to be sufficient in both supply and quality, and water quality is potentially affected in numerous ways by unconventional gas industry. First, and Jess has covered quite a bit of this already, but the water that is pulled out of the coal seam has got a lot of heavy metals in it. It's got volatile organic compounds, including benzene, which is a potent carcinogen, and as well as salt. And then you put water in that's been laced with a chemical cocktail that hasn't been assessed by our chemical regulator, and you've got other potential for interactions and unexpected results. Sorry. Oh, you can say that, that's okay. So, and supply is the other issue. So you do have to remove large volumes of water to get the gas to flow, and you've also got a massive problem with produced water. And salt is one of the constituents of the produced water that's particularly problematic in Australia. We already have a lot of dry land salinity problems, and the amounts of salt that are produced by this industry are quite mind-blowing. So 750,000 tonnes will come up every year from those 40,000 Queensland gas wells, and that's basically over 30 years, which is the life of the field, 31 million tonnes, and that's enough to fill the MCG to the brim 15 times. And at the moment the industry hasn't come up with a safe disposal method for this salt, apart from wrapping it in a couple of layers of plastic and burying it. Well, so So treating the wastewater is both expensive and energy consuming. You have to do this thing called reverse osmosis to get the salt out, and that consumes a lot of energy. It also doesn't remove all of the potentially nasty contaminants. They've also done other things with the wastewater in this country, along with discharging it into the Condamine River with levels of some contaminants that are above the guidelines and environmental guidelines. They've also done things like spray on access roads in the Queensland area to keep the dust down. So that's just untreated produced water just sprayed on roads. And also in Gloucester, they're proposing, part of AGL's proposal is to use diluted produced water, so not treated but just diluted, and spray it for irrigation. In areas where stock, please. So you can see how there's contaminants, they're going to get out there, and the salt will destroy those soils eventually, so they'll become unproductive land. So Jess mentioned common sense a few times, and I think, we get this, and our communities get this. As soon as you give them some of the facts of the matter, it just doesn't seem like a very sensible idea anywhere, and let alone in a drinking water catchment. So there are other risks as well, and I'm not going to labour these, but air pollution is a biggie, and it's probably the most common way that humans get directly exposed in gas fields, either working there or living. But there's basically a real problem because we don't have baseline monitoring and ongoing monitoring, so we don't really know how bad that problem is. Food as well is an issue because eventually contaminants are going to end up in the food chain, and the climate risks have been discussed already as well. So we've been recommending independent baseline and ongoing water and air monitoring and comprehensive health impact assessments for this industry for at least 3 years. Those things haven't happened yet. Still, the only routine data being collected is by the industry itself, and independent studies are small in scale and few in number, and population health studies are basically non-existent. But even in America, they have a similar situation. It's like they have about 500,000 gas wells over there. So this paper was published recently and admits that despite broad public concern, no comprehensive population-based studies of public health effects exist. So the authors report that US regulators are actually well aware that oil and gas development pose inherent environmental and public health risks, and that the extent of these risks is unknown because existing studies do not take into account the potential long-term cumulative effects. It's a bit of a head in the sand sort of situation by the looks of it. Our medical journal in Australia has published an article recently highlighting the risks and the uncertainties about an unconventional gas industry for this country. And basically makes the analogy of, well, if it was a drug, there's no way we would be putting it on the market, given how little we know and what the potential adverse effects actually are. Just to run through a few of the scientific papers that have been published that clearly demonstrate there are issues with the industry. This one shows that there's systematic evidence of methane contamination in many gas fields. And of course we've got no research into the long-term effects of having methane in drinking water. Apart from the fact you might be able to light it, what happens if you actually, drinking small quantities of it, nobody actually knows. An EPA community in Wyoming had an EPA 3-year study which definitely demonstrated contamination with fracking chemicals of their groundwater supply, and they've been trucking water in and keeping their bathroom doors and windows wide open for adequate ventilation as advised by the EPA. So this is not a benign industry. In our own Pilliga State Forest, we've got a confirmed aquifer that's being contaminated with heavy metals, including arsenic, lead, and so on, and also uranium at many times the safe drinking water guidelines. Now, this is apparently has occurred because a holding pond that was lined with plastic leaked. Not surprising, it was lined with plastic and it's sitting out there. So it leaked, the contaminated water, which was produced water from the coal seam, made its way through the soils, and as it did so, being salty, it mobilised these elements from those soils and ended up in an aquifer. Now, fortunately, that aquifer was not being used for any beneficial use, but nonetheless, it's sort of a proof positive that this can occur. And in fact, in that same development, which is still in the exploration phase, there's been many spill incidents. There's one rather large one which killed a lot of vegetation some time back. Nonetheless, the state government is considering Santos's request to fast track the approval for full production, and it's about an 800 well project up there. Just looking at air pollution risks, this is a study from the US showing that there are health effects if you're too close to a gas well, and that half a mile is the sort of arbitrary distance that they chose, but there are both cancer and non-cancer risks. And they've calculated that through using EPA guidelines, measuring their samples and then calculating back what the health risks are. And of course there are some immediate sort of symptoms that seem to occur around the time of well completion when there's a lot of stuff going on. Things like broken eye, irritation, breathing difficulties and so on. But it's the longer term effects, the cumulative cancer risks and things like that that can't be shown up and can't really be demonstrated unless you have a proper epidemiological study that looks at a population over a period of time. This is some research that you're probably aware of as well, which shows high levels of methane in the atmosphere generally in a coal seam gas field up in Queensland, and it's the same place where people have been complaining of an array of health symptoms that may or may not be attributable to the activities. But when you've got methane coming up from infrastructure or almost generally in this area, you're going to have other volatile organic compounds as well, and they have health effects. And finally, this paper which really was looking at animal health in rural areas, and there's some pretty spectacular case studies there of spill incidents which have had quite dramatic effects on animal health. So just to summarise, really, unconventional gas really has the potential to erode every environmental determinant of health that we have: air, water, food and climate. And we don't have comprehensive evidence, but I think we've got enough evidence to say that this is not a path that we want to go down, not without a whole lot more information and a whole lot more caution. And as we've been hearing from Mark, the economic arguments aren't really there, and we do have much better alternatives that don't have the same issues. So, just final summary, the unconventional gas entails clear risks that have not yet been fully quantified due to lack of disclosure and assessment of chemicals, lack of baseline and ongoing monitoring, and lack of health impact assessments, and harms that are occurring, the extent of which is unknown, including air and water pollution, health impacts and climate impacts. And we don't have an advantage over coal in terms of greenhouse gas emissions with gas. We don't have time for transition fuel, and we really don't need one according to the economics of renewable energy. And that's all. Thank you.